All. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from Drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So the dandelions, we used to blow on them to make wishes, and there is wine that is made from them. There is tea that is made from them. There are various kind of extracts. So this particular study was published, I think, in October 2021. According to this study, they talk about the leaf extract. So components of the leaf of the dandelion mixed in the water, and they saw in vitro. This is not an in vivo study. This is not an animal study or a human study. This is an in vitro study. And they saw in that in vitro study that the presence of dandelion leaf extract with the cells that have ACE2 and the presence of either a pseudovirus, a lab-built virus, or the spike proteins, they saw that spike proteins were not binding with the cells efficiently, number one. Number two, if these were binding, or if these had already bound the spike proteins, then presence of dandelion leaf extract helped remove them. So this is a very interesting study. And of course, the researchers say this research is from Germany, I believe University of Munich. And the researchers say that using this guidance, there should be more studies to look at the effect of dandelion leaf extract for SARS-CoV-2. So with this, let's start our discussion. So this is Drbeen.com. In the description of this video, there is a link to the most discounted ever Drbeen.com one-time payment plan. Okay, this is the study. In vitro effect of Taraxacum officinale, this is the dandelion, leaf aqueous extract, water extract, on the interaction between ACE2 cell surface receptor and SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, D614 and 4 mutants, D614 being the original one and then more mutants. Omicron is not part of this. Then this is some more about dandelions. This is also about dandelion. I loved this one. This is Mount Sinai and their discussion about dandelion. So they say, while many people think of the dandelion as a pesky weed, it is chock full of vitamins A, B, C, and D, as well as minerals such as iron, potassium, and zinc. So it is actually very heavy very rich in potassium, and it can cause hyperkalemia. So people with the cardiac issues should keep this in mind. Dandelion leaves are used to add flavor to salads, sandwiches, and teas. The roots are used in some coffee substitutes, and the flowers are used to make wines and to make wishes. So with this, there are lots of more references here as well, but let's start our discussion with, this is the paper, and I'll give you a quick look at the paper. I went over this paper a few times to extract the important points. So what we are going to do is the two things. First, we'll see a summary, and the summary should contain what is the study itself, what did they find, and what were the dose of the dandelion leaf extract that was used in this in vitro study. We would also see the side effects of the dandelion according to European Medicine Agency. And then we'll go in the detail of the detail of the study. So these are the gifts for humanity. Dandelion leaf extract. Leaf extract. These are not flowers, so don't start chewing on the flowers. Dandelion leaf extract helps reduce ACE2 and spike binding in vitro. Common dandelion called Taraxacum officinale. High molecular weight compounds. So this is important. What they did was they did 3 types of experiments. They took the leaf extract and saw the effect of it. Once they saw that there is an effect that spike protein cannot bind with ACE2 in the presence of this extract, then the second thing they did was they centrifuged that extract to separate out high molecular weight molecules and the low molecular weight molecules, or out of that leaf extract, the bigger particles from the smaller particles. And they found out that the actual efficacy was present in the compounds that were present in the high molecular weight. Again, it doesn't matter too much. Those scientists and researchers who are going to see what exact chemical substance is helping, they should know that this is high molecular weight part. They would still have to dig through that what is it. but for the rest of us all, leaf extract is sufficient to know. Now, the summary is here in this one little diagram. I believe I have the summary. It is an in vitro test. What they did was they took two cell lines. One is human embryonic kidney 293. These are the fetal embryonic kidney lines, which has human ACE2 on them. The other line was human lung cells. Remember the lung cancer patient? So lung cells with human ACE2 and TMPR SS2. So they wanted to study just the binding with the ACE2, and then they wanted to study the transduction of the pseudovirus. They built a fake virus using lentiform virus with the spike proteins from the SARS-CoV-2. And then they wanted to see if TMPRSS2 plus that virus can then enter the cell in the presence of dandelion leaf extract or not. So that was the basic setup. Here, this is the aqueous extract, water extract, or water dissolvable extract of dandelion leaves. So these little dotty things in here are the dandelion components. And what happens is, in the presence of the extract, on this side you are seeing this is a lentiform, not lentiform, lentivirus. It's a rotavirus, lentivirus with the spike proteins from the SARS-CoV-2. And here are some spike proteins. They're all sitting sad and crying because they cannot bind with this cell. Then, and do you know that this efficacy, this impact was within 1 minute of the presence of the dandelion extract? It was just so rapid. Because of this, the researchers think that it may be useful. Again, there are no studies for it, right? It may be useful as a chewable thing when somebody has met someone who may be SARS-CoV-2, infected. But again, there are no studies. Then they also use the other cells with the similar setup. And once again, neither the virus nor the spike could infect or bind with 100% success. They were not able to. So that is the basic summary of this all, the discussion. Now, the question, of course, will be what variants? Then the question will be what dose? Then the question will be what are the side effects? So that all is part of the summary. So variants. They took the wild type, that is, I believe, 614. And then the other types, alpha, beta, gamma, they know about Omicron, but they didn't do it. Delta was part of the testing as well. And they tested with these mutations. And if you read the actual paper, you would see that some mutations had slightly less efficacy or resistance versus others, but not too much. Now, European Scientific Cooperative on Phytotherapy. So this is actually Europe's Herbal Medicines Cooperative, an association that helps you with the phytotherapy or the plant-based therapies. And then there is a Commission E as well in Europe. So here are the recommendation of them, not for SARS-CoV-2. This is an in vitro study. Generally, if dandelion is used for someone, for some other conditions, they normally say that 4 to 10 gram thrice daily. And 20 to 30 milligram per milliliter in hot water. So I'm going to just very quickly show you this. 4 to 10 gram or 20 to 30 here. This is on page 10. The recommended dosage, I'm showing it to you so that people don't say Mubin is making it up. The recommended dosage is 4 to 10 gram, about 20 to 30 milligram per milliliter hot water, up to 3 times per day. And that is Commission E and ESCOP. So back here, contraindications. The contraindications do not come from the ESCOP or Commission E. Contraindications actually come from the European Science Agency, European Medicine Agency. So their contraindications are the following. Number one, if anybody is hypersensitive to this plant or its compounds, so of course, then they should not take it. Anyone with the liver and biliary diseases. Now, this is interesting because Native Americans here used to use, and I think they still use, dandelion extracts for liver problems, kidney problems. But, anyways, from the European Medicine Agency, liver and biliary diseases are a contraindication. Bile duct obstruction, for example, gallstones, cholangitis are contraindications. Active peptic ulcer, so this may be irritant, active peptic ulcer. And then most importantly, this plant is rich in potassium. So it take if a lots of dose is taken, then hyperkalemia can occur. There is no data for children under 12 years of age or pregnant women or lactating women. So there is no message for them here. Now, we're still on the summary. Couple of clinically important points that are from this paper. One is this. This is on page 10. This is a very important point. They say in the presence of the dandelion leaf extract, the ACE2's own function did not become disturbed. This is very important. So this is a drug or substance or chemical or phytotherapy that potentially has an effect. Actually, it does have an effect in vitro. However, the cell's ACE2 function was not disrupted. That means cell could continue to work in the inflammatory pathway and creating that anti-inflammatory balance that it does with ACE2. That's a very, very interesting thing. However, slightly less interesting or also interesting but not good is that ACE2 were downregulated. Now, this is a unexpected behavior. ACE2 enzymes, usually when they bind with spike protein or their own substrate, physiological substrate, or with any other thing, they usually get downregulated. That is, they are picked back up, they're pulled back in the cell and recycled. And then new ACE2 are made and they are brought up on the surface. But transiently, temporarily, if you bind these ACE2 with various things, then those will get downregulated. I still remember there was a time when there was a study that showed that binding of the vaccine spike to ACE2 would cause downregulation. Anything binding to ACE2 would cause downregulation. And then there was a lots of noise created that the vaccine is causing downregulation, and that was something abnormal. It is abnormal downregulation, but normally upregulation or normal regulation would occur again. So they observed that ACE2 was transiently downregulated. Now they said it can be useful. Why? For example, in the presence of the virus, if the ACE2 disappears, then the virus has less ACE2s to bind to. So infectivity and infection rate would reduce. So that's a good thing. The bad thing, we know that ACE2 functions in pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory and renin-angiotensin systems balance. So if ACE2 just disappears, then the ACE enzyme and its pro-inflammatory side will become more dominant in function, and that is bad. So again, in vitro study, but authors speculated that downregulation may have a positive and or a negative effect. So this was interesting from a clinical point of view. And I hope you saw this. This is the cell. This is the dandelion extract bound to ACE2 and having fun. This is a TMPRSS. When I made this TMPRSS2, I was cracking up. Look at this. He's looking at you and saying hi, and he has this little thing in his hand. So anyways, I digress. Next. Another clinically important, we're still in the summary, last point of the summary. Another clinically important point was the following. It only needed a very short time for dandelion leaf extract to work. 1 minute. And the effect started within 30 seconds. So very short time was needed to contact with the cells to have the dandelion's effect. Again, I'm intentionally repeating dandelion leaf extract so that if somebody is skipping right in the middle of the video and start listening, they don't take dandelion extract versus leaf extract confusion. So dandelion leaf extract. Now, the very short time to remove already bound spike proteins. So if you have a cell in vitro and you put spike proteins on it and they're now bound to its ACE2, then you put the dandelion leaf extract, and that was able to remove about 50% of these spike proteins from the cell. And the second thing is, if you gave a bath to this cell with the dandelion leaf extract, then you brought the spikes, then spikes found it very hard to bind. And you just needed to have the exposure for a very short time. So they thought that oral use after exposure. So let's say if I got exposed to someone, and just like those nasal vaccines and nasal rinses and oral rinses, this could be researched as well, that this is a possibility as well, to chew dandelion extract or something like that, and that should help. Now, there was one more very important clinical thing, and that was this was very smart of them. What they did was they put the dandelion extract, leaf extract, in saliva of a person or persons, and they incubated it at 37 degrees centigrade. That means the mouth environments. And the dandelion leaf extract continued to work. So saliva and the enzymes in the saliva do not destroy it. That means it can work in the mouth. It's a very, very interesting one. So now the summary is done. As part of the summary, now we know what the study is, we know what is the dose is, we know what other side effects are, and we know what kind of cells they tested it on and what kind of tests they were doing. Now, so this is 16 minutes done. Now we're going to go in the detail of some of the steps they did. So here you can see a little spike protein crying and walking away. Why? Because the ACE2s are bound by the dandelion leaf extract. So first of all, T officinale. And so what they did was they didn't just try the dandelion leaf extract. They also had one more plant, and I'm finding it so hard to pronounce them, but Psychorium intybus. That was the second plant. Why did they have two plants? They also had water as a control. Why did they have two plants? This Psychorium intybus, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is also of the same family as the dandelion. What they wanted to see was, is every plant in this family does it, or is it really dandelion's behavior? And they saw that it was the dandelion that was more potent compared to the Psychorium intybus. So that means they had three kind of things, like Psychorium intybus, dandelion, and water. So here, what they found was EC50, so the concentration of where the effect of 50% effect was seen, 14.9 milligram per milliliter of dandelion leaf extract was sufficient to cause the spike proteins to be blocked from binding. So that's one. Then what they did was they said, fine. So imagine you are the expert, you are the scientist. So you take the leaf and you get the extract, and you put the cells together and you put the virus together, the pseudovirus near the cells, and you have the extract in there, and the virus is getting hard time infecting. So you say, all right, what kind of things in this extract are doing this function? So what you do is you centrifuge it and you take the higher density versus lower density and then separately test them. So that's what they did next. So they took the leaf extract, separated the extract in two high molecular weight particles and the low molecular weight compounds, I should say. Then they saw that high molecular weight compounds were able to produce the effect better than low molecular weight compounds. So that means it was a high molecular weight. There is something or things in high molecular weight part or bigger particles of this extract which do this action. Very interesting. So here, this is the low molecular weight, and the spike proteins were able to bind even in the presence of the low molecular weight. So you can see this little spike protein being very happy. Over here, this spike protein is all sad and crying and going away because it cannot bind. So then what did they do? The time, pre-incubation, they took the cells and they pre-incubated for 1 minute. For 1 minute, that's just so beautiful. They pre-incubated the cells for 1 minute with the dandelion leaf extract, and then they put spikes on them, like a little pepper and salt. So they put the spikes on them, and they saw that the binding was reduced by 76.67%, plus minus 2.9. Can you imagine just 1 minute's exposure or 1 minute's pre-treatment of the cells reduce the spike binding by 76.67%? And they also saw that the high molecular weight component was doing it by 62.5%. So majority of the action came from the high molecular weight part. So 62.5 plus minus 13.4. And this was compared to the water control. The C. intybus, the other leaf extract of the same family of the plants, that had the efficacy of only 37%, plus minus 20. And this effect started within 30 seconds. In the study, they said about 50% of the efficacy, meaning not efficacy, you shouldn't use that term. Efficacy is a different term. 50% of the spikes are blocked from binding after 30 seconds. That's almost magical. Okay. So then they said, we asked this question, is extract able to replace already bound spikes? So somebody is already exposed and the spike proteins are already bound to the ACE2. Now, if you put the extract there, will that help or all is lost? And they found that 50% of the already bound spikes were removed by the presence of the extract. And as I said before, incubation with saliva at normal temperature, our body temperature, did not affect the functioning of the extract. So it can work in mouth. And the researchers said that mouth and nose, especially mouth area, is important for the virus to get hold of us. So this extract works there, which is a very important thing. Then they asked the next question. They said, will ACE2 binding affect cellular function? So when the extract is bound to the ACE2, will the function of the cell be affected? So they once again pre-treated or treated a cell or cells with the leaf extract for 1 to 24 hours. And then they observed the cellular behavior. So I drew this little diagram where they're dissecting the cell and then standing on it to look in the cell. So what they did was they broke the cell. They caused lysis of the cell. They broke it. And then they looked into the cell to see, are the cellular functions intact? Are the enzymes intact? Was the cell continuing to function or not? And they found out that inside the cell, everything was working fine, except that ACE2 enzyme itself had become downregulated. So that's a very good thing. I mean, not the ACE2 enzyme downregulation, but generally very good thing that the cell's functionality, even of the ACE2, was not affected. Just the binding. I could say this was an electromagnetic interference for the binding. Okay, continuing. So how efficient was the leaf extract to prevent this pseudovirus transduction? So pseudovirus, they had this lentivirus on which they put those spike proteins on it like decorations, and then they wanted that virus to kind of infect the cells. So they call it transduction. And what they did was they pre-treated a bunch of cells with the dandelion extract. Then they exposed these cells to these pseudoviruses. So pseudovirus is made up of the spike protein from the original variant, 85% reduction in binding capability or binding at 20 milligram per milliliter leaf extract. 85% reduction. And delta, 72% reduction. So lesser than the original Wuhan, but still 72% reduction. Now, this is a very interesting note from the study. I was cracking up and I was with joy or happiness. And that is this. They also tested anti-ACE2 antibodies They put them in the in vitro cells to see if the antibodies are present, will they block the virus binding to the ACE2? And they should. And they found that at 100 microgram per milliliter concentration, the antibodies were only 74%, were able to block the binding by 74%. Or not, I should say it correctly. They blocked the binding down by 26%, so 74% was reduced compared to 85% or 72%. Even if you take 72% and 74% here, they're almost equal. This function almost was like an anti-ACE2 antibody. That's a very interesting thing. And finally, they said, we were curious. They said, we were curious to say, how is dandelion leaf extract working? Is it working to prevent the binding of ACE2 and the spike protein? Or is it working once the spike protein has become bound? Or is it working that once the virus has infected the cell? So they did 3 separate environments, thanks to these scientists and researchers who take pains to do those things, while people like me are gaining weight. So here, what they did was, they did one batch of testing with pre-treated cells. Pre-treated with what? With the extract. So they had a bunch of cells, they treated them with the dandelion leaf extract, then they exposed them to the infection or transduction. So this was, can dandelion prevent, can it act as a prophylaxis? Then the second test they did was they actually exposed the cell to spikes and the virus first, again lentivirus. Then they put the dandelion in the middle of these guys as well. And the third one was that they actually allowed the virus to do the infection, and then they put dandelion on these cells. So the efficacy at 10 milligram per milliliter, again, I keep using the word efficacy. This is not efficacy. This is just reduction in binding. At 10 milligram per milliliter, for the cell which was pre-treated, 70% reduction in transduction or infectivity, plus minus 16.7%. How did they find out? They had made them radiolucent, and so they were able to look at the luminance of the activity. So they saw the reduction in luminance, which was a indicator of reduction in activity or transduction. So 70% reduction if cells were treated before, so kind of prophylaxis in vitro. If the infection had happened and it was happening and they put the dandelion extract, then 58% plus minus 9.6. If they allowed the transduction to occur and then they put dandelion on these cells, then 53% plus minus 8.1. So most interesting on the prophylaxis side, but also useful for the other phases. That's what they found. And just to refresh your memory, European Scientific Cooperative on phytotherapy says 4 to 10 gram thrice daily, 20 to 30 milligram per milliliter hot water, tea. Contraindications are hypersensitivity to this plant or its compounds or its family, liver, biliary diseases, bile duct obstruction, gallstones, cholangitis, active peptic ulcer, somebody who's prone to hyperkalemia, or more potassium can hurt them. And there is no data for children under 12 or women who are pregnant or lactating. This is the discussion for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I loved it. It was just such a fun thing to read and look at the paper. So with this, John says, it is interesting to see how many tests are done on HEK293 cell line. I wonder if most people, I don't think people actually know. They found out most of the time with the vaccines, and then they had this fetal issue. But many of these tests are done with these cell lines. So yes, you are pointing it out correctly. So with this, thank you very much. And I hope these drawings and illustrations were able to bring some message, some clarity to the message. If you would like to support this work, or if you would like to get another 800 videos access other than the one on YouTube, you can go to drbeen.com. The link is in the description. For a very low price, you get one-time fee. You get access to all those 800 videos. Not only that, every time there is a new video, there is no extra charges. It's a one-time fee to join the club. Let's be Cool Bean family. In addition to that, there are links in the description. You can buy me a coffee, or you can use PayPal, or you can become a patron, or you can use Substack. So you have many options. And the smallest thing you can do for me is if you can like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much. And I would see you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.